Hello, and welcome to everyone who is joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to start off by acknowledging that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Burra Marigal clan of the Darug people in the beautiful Parramatta region. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we all work today and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge the First Nations people participating on this webinar today. I'm your host. My name is Abe Lau. I am a Principal Inspector with the Hygiene and Toxicology team at SafeWork New South Wales. I would like to introduce the panel to you right now. On my left, I have Michael Weller, who is a State Inspector of the Hygiene and Toxicology team.
Good morning, everyone.
And on the far chair is Amanda Wilson, a Project Officer from our Silica team at SafeWork.
Thanks, Abe. Morning, everyone.
Before we begin, I'd like to start off with some housekeeping notes. This session will take about 45 minutes. On your screen, somewhere where you're watching from, there should be another screen to the side that says Slido. This is where you can enter your questions, and your questions will come to us, and we try and answer those at the end of this session in the Q&A session. This webinar will be recorded and will be made available for you on our website in coming weeks. After this session, you'll get an email with all the slides that you see today and links to the relevant websites, and we will send those to you. So the purpose of this session today is to provide an overview of the changes that will be commencing on 1st of July 2024 in New South Wales. In this session, we'll be covering off a few topics: the reasons for the engineered stone ban, what the engineered stone ban includes and does not include. We talk about the New South Wales transitional arrangements, working with legacy engineered stone and notification requirements. And finally, at the end, we'll have a Q&A session with any questions that you might have regarding the stuff we're talking about today. So, to start off, first question for Michael. Michael, we know silica continues to be a key issue in the engineered stone industry. Can you please explain why engineered stone is being banned?
Sure, Abe, thanks. Look, I'm aware many of you will have an appreciation of the hazards of silica dust, but I'll just quickly go through some key points for those who may not be aware in the audience. Crystalline silica is a form of silicon dioxide, the crystalline form, and it's a naturally occurring mineral found in most soils and rocks, including granite and sandstone, and of course is used in building products like concrete and of course engineered stone, the topic of today. On the slide there you can see various building materials that contain crystalline silica, and engineered stone, at least up till recent times, contained a very high content of crystalline silica, usually in the form of quartz. So when those stone slabs were processed, typically processed, they had the potential to create very high levels of airborne dust, silica dust, and we call that respirable crystalline silica because those fine particles were small enough to be inhaled into the lungs of unprotected workers. And that image, photo there is an image of a single strand of hair which is blown up about 10,000 times magnification, and the width of that strand of hair is about 60 microns. And you can see that those little silica particles attached there are all less than about 10 microns in diameter, which is the size of respirable sized particles, and lower, which can be inhaled into the lungs. So it just goes to show how small these particles are, and obviously each one of those individual particles can't be seen by the naked eye. Thanks, Abe. So, in terms of the ban, once again, many of you will be aware that exposure to sufficient concentrations of respirable crystalline silica can lead to serious lung diseases such as silicosis, amongst other diseases. And on this graph here, we are showing the number of cases that have been reported to SafeWork New South Wales by the New South Wales Ministry of Health over the past 7 years. That the reporting to the Ministry of Health started in 2021. But the peak there, or the most number of cases, occurred in 2019, 2020, with 107 cases of silicosis, and that really was the result of workers starting to go and get lung screening as a result of inspectors issuing improvement notices for those workers to get, we called it lung screening or health monitoring. So that in effect was like a backlog of cases of workers who otherwise may not have been aware that they actually did have silicosis. So since then, you can see in the following years, it was a fairly steady number, but year to date, this financial year, we've had an uptick. So we'll probably see by the end of this financial year 100 cases again. Now, of course, this is only New South Wales I'm talking about, and these numbers are pretty much reflected in the other larger states such as Victoria and Queensland. So thanks, Abe. So when we look at the cases for this financial year that I've just mentioned, by industry, certainly a good majority of those are still coming from workers who have worked in engineered stone or in the stone industry. About 3/4 of them, and then you can see the rest have come from construction. The issue in terms of the engineered stone industry was that we were seeing many young workers, which was very unusual, developing silicosis perhaps only after a few years of exposure, which indicated that they were likely to be exposed to quite or very high levels of respirable crystalline silica. Now, you may not be aware, silicosis is generally not a curable disease, and it can progress. So even with workers who are no longer exposed, it is possible that we'll still see a steady flow of those numbers for a few years yet, unfortunately. So in response to this situation, as I said, in New South Wales and also in other states and territories of Australia, the workplace health and safety ministers from all the states and territories, taking all this into consideration, decided to or agreed to prohibit or ban the manufacture, supply or processing and installation of engineered stone bench tops, panels or slabs. Thanks, Abe.
So, Michael, the engineered stone ban is on the 1st of July of this year, in a couple of weeks' time. Can you talk through what this ban means?
Sure, Abe. This is on the screen. We've got the definition, which essentially is out of the regulation. And just to quickly talk through it, because I'm sure you can all read that. Engineered stone is an artificial product, and the key here is that it contains 1% or more crystalline silica, and that's determined on a weight basis. And it's produced by combining natural stone materials. Now, typically that was quartz with engineered stone, but there was another form of crystalline silica called cristobalite, which was present in some of the slab products. And then it's combined with those other chemical ingredients like resins or pigments, and then becomes hardened. And that's the key to defining what engineered stone is, Abe.
Okay, Michael. So does the ban apply to all products made from engineered stone that has more than 1% silica?
In the regulation, the ban refers to work that involves a supply or manufacture, supply, processing or installation of engineered stone bench tops, slabs or panels. That specifically applies to those forms of engineered stone. Now, just as a side note, There's no need for people who have, say, a kitchen benchtop already installed in their house to be at all concerned, because there's no exposure to any dust. However, we'd certainly recommend that, and we'll cover this in a bit more detail a bit later. But it's important that customers don't undertake do-it-yourself work. Say if they want to renovate their kitchen, they might want to need to work with an engineered stone slab. They need to use someone, a qualified tradesperson, and that tradesperson needs to implement control measures to minimise the generation of any dust during that, say, renovation or modification to the slab. But we'll cover that in some more detail shortly. Thanks, Abe.
Thanks, Michael. So you've just talked about what the ban does include. Can you run through what the ban does not include, does not apply to?
Sure, Abe. So there are a number of exceptions. So, for example, working with panels, slabs and bench tops that are made with porcelain or sintered stone are allowed, as long as they don't contain a resin. Engineered stone products that are not bench tops, panels and slabs, such as finished products, perhaps like a garden ornament or a sculpture, they're not covered by the ban. Of course, natural stone bench tops that have existed for many years, like granite or marble, are not covered by the ban, or they're excluded from the ban. And of course, other building products like concrete, bricks and tiles, they're not covered by the ban.
Okay. Michael, I understand that this is a national ban. Different states will approach the ban in different ways. Can you please describe the transitional arrangements in New South Wales?
Sure, Abe. So, as Abe mentioned, there are some what we call transitional arrangements. That's sort of a bit like a breathing space. So in New South Wales, for the manufacture, supply and installation of engineered stone, panels, slabs and bench tops, if a contract was entered before the 31st of December 2023 to, say, install a kitchen that had engineered stone, it's permissible to install that kitchen or bench top up till the 31st of December 2024. But that has to be obviously done safely in a manner where the installation is done by a worker wearing respiratory protective equipment or respirators, and the processing or installation of that bench top is controlled, say if it requires any polishing or other processes. And processes are defined as things like polishing or grinding or cutting. So the work, however, must be completed by the 1st of January 2025. So the installation must be completed. Now, for those businesses who say are situated near the borders with say Queensland, Victoria, and even the ACT, there is no transition period. So the complete ban commences on the 1st of July 2024, or the 30th of June, if you like, midnight 30th of June 2024. So that covers the arrangements, and also with the other states, Abe.
Thanks, Michael, for explaining some of those conditions of the engineered stone ban. Amanda, can you please take us through the notification process for permitted work with engineered stone?
Awesome. Thanks, Abe. So from the 1st of July, businesses who intend to process legacy engineered stone must notify SafeWork New South Wales. Now, there's a couple of terms that I'd like to highlight, and just to assist with this explanation. The first term, legacy engineered stone, is defined as engineered stone that is installed as a kitchen bench top or a bathroom counter, or a stock of engineered stone that wasn't installed prior to the engineered stone ban. The second term, processing, in this context, refers to engineered stone, using a power tool or other mechanical plant to crush, cut, grind, trim, sand, abrasive polish, or drill the stone or product. Now, businesses must notify Safe Work New South Wales when they intend to make repairs, minor modifications, remove or dispose of installed engineered stone products or stock. And this is a really important point. Notification is only required if processing is involved. So I'd just like to run through a couple of examples, regarding that kind of work that needs to be notified. So the first one may be where a crack is in an installed engineered stone benchtop. The repairer may fill the crack with liquid resin and then use a power tool to repolish the engineered stone. Another example may be where they need to make a minor modification to install a new power point. So the worker uses a power drill to make that hole in the engineered stone. There may also be a need to replace an existing stovetop that's installed on an engineered stone benchtop. And that stovetop is bigger than the previous one, so they need to use a power tool to trim that, trim the hole to make it larger, and fit that replacement stovetop. Also, if there's a kitchen renovation, they may remove an engineered stone benchtop and the splashback using mechanical plant or to crush the engineered stone to facilitate an easier disposal. Like in this crushed stone that would then be taken to a waste facility. Just also, if there's potentially a scenario where a business starts working on a kitchen benchtop and they aren't initially aware that it's engineered stone, they're then required to notify Safe Work New South Wales as soon as they become aware that it is engineered stone. Good, thanks, Abe. Brilliant. So businesses need to notify Safe Work annually. When notifying, businesses will be required to estimate the type, frequency and duration of processing work that they intend to undertake over the next 12 months. A business must re-notify, Safe Work New South Wales within 30 calendar days of the following occurring. So if the business becomes aware that there's a change in the information that they've provided previously, let's just say there's an increase in the frequency of processing work that they have, or the duration of the work has changed, then they need to re-notify. Another scenario may be, the other scenario is where at the end of the 12 months, they need to re-notify for the following next 12 months. And just a note on that, if the business ceases to process legacy engineered stone, then they don't need to notify. That's fine. When a business notifies, they'll receive an acknowledgement. They're required to keep a copy of each notification for 5 years. And they must ensure that each notification is readily accessible to any person. Could be a worker or HSR or member of the public even, upon their request. And for any cross-border businesses, they must adhere to the jurisdiction's notification requirements. So we're in the process of developing a digital notification form to accept these notifications for the 1st of July. Businesses will be able to access the form via the SafeWork New South Wales website, as well as have access to supporting documentation to help them through the process. Thanks, Abe.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. Right, so just changing the slide to the next one. So in support of the engineered stone ban on the 1st of July of this year, there will be, there will be further reforms on the 1st of September 2024. The responsibilities for PCBUs will change on this date, 1st September 2024, when we need to be aware of a new term, and that term is crystalline silica substances, or CSS for short. You see that on your screen. CSS is any material that contains at least 1% crystalline silica. So that will include engineered stone in the form that we understand it. It also will include things like natural stones, like marble and granite, and many building products as well that contain silica. Without going into too much detail, at a stage later from today, we will have another webinar explaining some of these further reforms. But in general terms, just to mention a couple of high-level things, from the 1st of September, PCBUs must ensure that all processing of CSS, or crystalline silica containing substances, is controlled. The definition of a controlled process, or what control means, will be updated in the 1st of September 2024 legislation. Also, from the 1st of September, PCBUs must conduct a documented risk assessment to identify if the processing of CSS is high risk or not. And from that point, if you have assessed it as being high risk, there will be other requirements that follow on from that. And as I mentioned, more details about that will be coming in a later webinar. So we're at the stage now where we've just to summarise a few things that have happened up to this point. So far, Michael has talked through why engineered stone is being banned and how engineered stone is being defined by WHS legislation. Michael's also described the products that the ban applies to, as well as the products that this ban does not apply to. Amanda has taken us through the notification requirements required in New South Wales, which may be different in different states. And we've just touched a little bit on the further silica reforms that will commence on the 1st of September of this year. So we'll now look through some of the questions that have been sent through. Just keep in mind that we do have some people moderating the questions, so you may have sent some emails, some questions through, but they may not appear on your screen because they're being moderated. Don't worry, they're all being captured, and if we don't see them today, we might see them in an email with some questions and answers in the future. Today, please be aware that we may not get to all the questions either, but if that's the case, those questions will be on that email at a later point. So just to kick off, looking at some of these questions. Okay, so Michael, you're going to answer these questions?
Yep, sure. Let's see what we've got.
Good. What do stone businesses do with leftover engineered stone products that aren't able to be sold?
Well, as we've mentioned, the ban comes on on the 1st of July 2024. PCBs have got till the end of the year if they've signed their contract prior to the 31st of December 2023. But essentially, if that's not the case, then that product can't be used. So essentially, we'd recommend that that any leftover stone slabs, there's no other option but to have them removed or disposed of. Amanda mentioned at a waste facility. That's pretty much it.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Michael. Next question. What evidence do businesses need to gather to prove a product is engineered stone or not?
Well, as we've discussed with the ban, it involves supply or manufacture, although I'm not aware of too much manufacturing in Australia, but manufacturing, supply or processing. So clearly the processing occurs in a fabricating workshop, and also to the installation. So it's the whole supply chain. So suppliers of engineered stone are obviously caught up in that. But let's just take an example. If you're a fabricator and wanted to know whether the product you were going to use was engineered stone or not, then clearly as a fabricator you'll need to have a discussion with the supplier or who's providing you with that stone slab, and we'll need some evidence that the product is not engineered stone, and essentially that'll mean it will contain less than 1% crystalline silica. Now, we've already seen, when I say we, as inspectors, we've seen some of the major suppliers already produce that sort of documentation. They've got certificates as evidence, and usually that will take the form of a laboratory report, Abe, and we've got an example of that up on the screen. Now, one key thing is that that report, the analysis should be carried out by a NATA or a laboratory that is NATA accredited to undertake that analytical test. So essentially it's a test in a laboratory to determine the content of crystalline silica, say in this particular example. Now, this is a report here, and before you might have heard me say that most engineered stone contain quartz, but some also contain a form of silica called cristobalite. And in this particular example here, on this laboratory certificate, the cristobalite there, it says it's less than what's called the LOQ, which LOQ means the limit of quantitation. So basically that just means that no cristobalite was detected or in this particular sample.
Okay.
So that's an example of the sort of evidence that PCBUs should obtain from their suppliers that the product they're working with is not engineered stone.
Thanks, Michael. Excellent. Next question. So this is about before the ban was announced, there was probably a few different ideas of how to manage this risk in different parts of the country. So the question is, will there be a licensing system to carry out work on legacy stone?
No, there is no licensing system, and as Amanda's explained, it's the notification to work on legacy stone is a requirement.
Yep.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Another question here. Am I right then that demolition using hand tools, for example, sledgehammer to bench, when doing a complete, when doing a complete strip out, would not be processing?
Correct. Yep.
Excellent. Short and sharp. Next question. Will SafeWork New South Wales be providing a CSS risk assessment template?
So that's in relation to the September 1 reforms that Abe was referring to. So there is currently guidance material being prepared by SafeWork Australia, which will contain some templates for a risk assessment and silica risk control plan.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. Another question that has come through. Is notification to SafeWork incumbent on the site owner or the contractor conducting the works, or both?
That's a really good question. Essentially, the person or the subcontractor doing the work, the PCBU doing the work, is incumbent upon them to do the notification.
Right. Presumably, they're more aware of what the actual processes they're going to engage. And
well, exactly. On a larger site, it may be the principal contractor as well. We'll want to make sure that the subcontractor has done the notification.
Yeah. Okay. Another question here. what is the process of regulating contracts prior to December 2023? Will stonemasons need to produce these as requested? Will there be spot checks to ensure everyone is operating safely?
At this stage, I'll just say that's quite possible, quite likely.
Thank you, Michael. The next question now. Newly formulated slabs, now called mineral surfaces, or silica-free surface, or zero silica, can you confirm that these materials are in fact exempt?
Free crystalline silica, yes, they would be exempt. But as once again, if we were to inquire into that, we would want to see some evidence of that, if that was, say, being fabricated in a workshop.
Yeah. So, and as mentioned before, if PCBUs aren't able to prove or provide evidence that the material is in fact what they say it is, then we recommend they should avoid that for now.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah. Will working with CSS become high-risk work and therefore require a safe work method statement?
If a safe work method statement will be required for construction sites, as it currently is actually under the regulations for working with silica products, there will be some additional requirements to be included into the safe work method statement. However, probably best to, as A pointed out, we'll be having some further communication about the September 1 new legislative requirements.
Okay. We've covered off a bit of information today, and there's a request here to repeat some of that information. Can you please repeat how New South Wales fabricators on the Queensland border are affected by the ban?
Well, simply that Queensland doesn't have a transitional period, so the ban, there's no work permitted supply, manufacture or installation of engineered stone after the midnight the 30th of June 2024. But having said that, I'd certainly recommend you go to their website, the Queensland Division of Workplace Health and Safety, if you want to get any further clarification on requirements in Queensland.
Okay. Yeah, good advice. Thank you. Another question come through. How can we be certain that the replacement products being offered are RCS free, respirable crystalline silica free? For example, buy Caesarstone with their new product that has glass instead of quartz.
Well, that's a good example. I've recently seen some test certificates, such as the one on your screen now, that have come from Caesarstone, which reflect that their stone slab does not contain crystalline silica. So it's going back to your supplier and confirming that.
Okay, thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, Michael. Another question come through. Will the notification require approval prior to any legacy work commencing?
Do you want to answer that one?
No. So it's a notification that doesn't go through an assessment process by Safe Work New South Wales or any regulator. We'll just be providing you with an acknowledgement that we've received it.
Right. So Safe Work won't be approving the work. We're just asking to be notified of the work.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Another question's came through. Will Safe Work New South Wales release guidelines on the approved control measures that can be implemented on site?
I think we already have to a large degree. I guess something that we haven't discussed is that we currently do have an engineered stone code of practice that was released a couple of years ago. That code of practice will be repealed as a result of the ban and the new regulations coming in on the 1st of September. But currently that that document itself has guidance material on control measures. So I'd refer for anyone to that.
Right. Okay. A question here. So does this mean that we need to report or notify it to Safe Work New South Wales when sending a slab to landfill if it hasn't previously been cut or installed?
Well, I would think if it's going to landfill, it would go to some sort of waste management facility. And if part of their if part of what they do with that piece of engineered stone is to process it, then there may be a requirement there to notify.
Okay. Thanks, Amanda.
But just to add to Amanda's comment, that if for instance, if it goes to a building waste and demolition recycling centre, any waste, then the onus is on that building demolition and waste and recycling centre to notify us if they're processing the stone.
Yep.
So the key is the processing part.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just waiting for another question to come through. But if there isn't a question in the next little while, here we go. The question is, how about a renovation job? If the quotation or contract was signed with a kitchen company or builder before December 31, 2023, will it still allow the use of engineered stone after 1st of July 2024? Do you want me to repeat that?
Yeah, just say that again.
So, excuse me. So this is talking about renovations. If the quote or contract was signed with a kitchen company or builder before December 31 last year, will it still allow the use of engineered stone after 1st July 2024?
Yeah, so you've got till the end of this year, basically, to have that installed.
Yep. I'll just wait for a few seconds to see if another question comes through, and if not, we'll just move on to the next section. And I don't think there's anything coming through, so we might just move on to the next slide, which is where to find more information. So there are a couple of good websites that you can keep up to date on the latest information. Firstly, the Safe Work Australia website contains comprehensive information and lots of frequently asked questions aimed at the various groups that are impacted, such as businesses and consumers and the general public. Also, the Safe Work New South Wales website currently has quite a few frequently asked questions, and the website will be updated on 1st of July with all the relevant information, including notification processes. So basically, we've come to the end of our webinar for today. Thank you for your attention. We'd like to thank all of you who attended today's webinar. And just a reminder that a copy of the slides that you see today and a recording of the session will be sent to you after this session today. We will be also providing a summary of the questions and answers over the next couple of weeks. And finally, keep an eye out for our next webinar, which will talk in more detail about the new requirements commencing 1st of September 2024. So on behalf of my colleagues here at Safe Work New South Wales, thank you for your time and attention and effort in tuning in today. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.